Welcome to Left Africa.
We are unpacking a comprehensive dossier looking at the huge political fallout in Kenya right now. Specifically, this clash between President William Ruto and his former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua.
Right, and our mission today is to untangle this incredibly intricate web. We're looking at alleged multi-million-dollar bribes. We're examining court rulings that seem to completely defy basic legal logic.
Oh, the court ruling is wild. We'll get to that.
It really is. And we're exploring what this entire saga means for the future of democratic institutions, not just in Kenya, but, across the African continent.
So with that on the table, let's just start with the bombshell.
Let's do it.
The date is June 9, 2026. Rigathi Gachagua is speaking to the press from his home in Wamunyoro village.
Right.
And he claims that President Ruto sent intermediaries to offer him 2 billion Kenyan shillings.
Which is a staggering number.
It is. That translates to roughly 15 million US dollars. And the offer was allegedly made to get him to resign before his October 2024 impeachment.
So to really grasp the magnitude of that allegation, we have to look at how these two men actually got into power in the first place.
Right, because they were a team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we rewind to 2022, William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua ran on what they called the hustler narrative.
The hustler narrative. I love that branding, actually.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was a fascinating shift in Kenyan politics because historically, Kenyan elections have heavily revolved around ethnic alliances. But the hustler campaign was essentially economic populism. It was, frankly, brilliant class warfare. They campaigned as the champions of the common Kenyan.
Like the everyday hustler pushing a wheelbarrow, right?
Yes, the wheelbarrow was literally their symbol. They were fighting against the entrenched, corrupt political dynasties that had run the country for decades.
And Gachagua was the guy who really brought in the numbers for that win.
He was vital. He delivered the Mount Kenya voting bloc. And in Kenyan electoral math, the Mount Kenya region is everything.
It's massive.
It's heavily populated, historically super influential, and an absolute economic engine for the country. You really rarely win a national election without significant backing from that region.
So Gachagua brought them to the table, and they won the presidency.
They did. But fast forward barely 2 years, and the alliance completely shatters. In October 2024, Gachagua is impeached by the National Assembly.
Right, for gross corruption and money laundering.
Exactly. He is swiftly removed from office and then replaced by the Interior Minister, Kithure Kindiki.
Okay, so when I was reading through the dossier, the visualization that just kept coming to my mind was a corporate hostile takeover.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, because you have a CEO who wants to oust a rebellious co-founder, a messy public board meeting where all the company's dirty laundry gets aired out is just, well, it's bad for the stock price.
Yeah, nobody wants that public mess.
Exactly. So the CEO tries to buy him out. Take the 15 million, sign the non-disclosure agreement, and let's just pretend we had creative differences.
It's a transactional solution to a political problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, if Gachagua's claim is true, it shows a real preference for quiet removal over public accountability.
But here's the thing. I'm looking at Gachagua's press conference quotes from the dossier, and he's really painting himself as this untouchable man of the people.
He is.
He says, and I quote, "If I were a man interested in money, I would have accepted Ruto's 2 billion shillings. But let's be real for a second. Does turning down the money automatically make him a principled martyr? Or is he just, doing the math, looking at his 7 million Mount Kenya voters and realizing his political leverage is worth way more than 15 million bucks?
That is the essential calculation of power, right? In the realm of elite politics, $15 million is a massive fortune, sure, but it's a finite resource.
Right. Once you spend it, it's gone.
Exactly. Political power, on the other hand, is an engine. It generates infinite capital, influence, and most importantly, protection.
Protection from prosecution.
Exactly. Gachagua understands that accepting the money means permanent exile from the chessboard. You're out of the game. By rejecting it, or at least publicly claiming to have rejected it, he retains his position as a major player.
So he's using the allegation itself to wound his opponent and maintain his own relevance.
Yes, it's weaponized transparency.
Weaponized transparency, I like that. He's airing the dirty laundry just to stay in the game. But what really caught my attention was the timing of this press conference.
Oh, the timing is no accident.
Right. He didn't just wake up on June 9th and decide to drop this information out of the blue. This entire media spectacle was triggered by a legal decision made the very day before.
The June 8th, 2026 High Court ruling.
Yes, this ruling broke my brain a little bit.
It left a lot of legal scholars completely baffled, to be honest. It's where the political drama intersects with constitutional law in a very strange way.
So break this down for us. What happened in court?
So a three-judge bench justices, Eric Ogola, Anthony Marema, and Freda Mugambi, they reviewed the Senate trial that resulted in Gachagua's removal.
Okay.
And their findings were stunning. They concluded that the Senate trial actually did violate Gachagua's constitutional right to a fair hearing under Article 50.
Wait, I read that they agreed his rights were violated, but how exactly did the Senate violate his rights? Like, what went wrong in the actual chamber?
Well, the core of the violation centered on the denial of due process, specifically regarding his ability to mount a defense. According to the court's review, Gachagua was denied the adequate opportunity to call his witnesses. And, I mean, in any judicial or quasi-judicial proceeding, the ability to present evidence and have witnesses testify on your behalf.
That's like the most basic pillar of fairness.
Exactly. It's a foundational pillar. So the judges looked at the timeline, the procedure, the restrictions placed on his defense team, and they determined it absolutely breached the constitutional standard.
Okay, so logically, if the highest court looks at the foundation of an impeachment and says this was built on a constitutional violation, then the entire impeachment should collapse, right?
That would be the logical legal conclusion, yes.
The House comes down. But that is not what these judges did.
No, it is not.
Despite openly admitting on the official record that the process was unconstitutional, they refused to nullify the impeachment.
Right. They claim that putting Gachagua back into office would cause, quote, greater constitutional instability.
Greater constitutional instability, so instead of reinstating him.
Instead of reinstating him to his rightful position, the court ordered the Senate to pay Gachagua 50 million shillings in damages.
Wait, 50 million shillings? Let me do the math on that. That's roughly, what, $370,000?
Just about, yeah.
That is basically a rounding error compared to the $15 million bribe he was allegedly offered to leave in the first place.
It's a fraction.
It's crazy. Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy because it's just so absurd. Imagine a building inspector looking at a newly constructed skyscraper, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
And the inspector confirms that the concrete poured into the foundation is completely defective. It's illegal. It's going to fail.
A disaster waiting to happen.
Right. But the inspector decides not to condemn the building because evacuating all the tenants would cause a massive traffic jam downtown.
Right, the instability.
Exactly. So instead, the inspector just fines the construction company a few $1,000 and lets everyone keep living in a structurally compromised tower.
That is, unfortunately, a very accurate analogy. It really highlights the tension between legal purity and political reality.
Because they just let it stand.
Yeah, legal experts immediately dubbed this a Solomonic judgment that split the baby but kept the crown.
Wow. Split the baby but kept the crown.
Yeah. The court attempted to appease the law by acknowledging the constitutional violation, but they appeased the political establishment by leaving the new Deputy President Kithure Kindiki in power.
Because they were terrified of what would happen if they didn't.
Probably. The judges were likely weighing the chaos of having two men claiming the deputy presidency, the potential for street protests, and, the total paralysis of the executive branch.
But Gachagua's reaction was, completely furious.
Oh, absolutely livid.
He rejected the 50 million shillings entirely. He called it an insult to the Constitution and to his 7 million supporters. He labeled the whole ordeal a constitutional coup d'etat.
Well, from his perspective, the judiciary just admitted that the executive and legislative branches broke the law to remove him. And the judiciary's response was to essentially issue a penalty fee rather than actually correct the underlying injustice.
Right. And here is my big question on this. If a judiciary can admit a process is fundamentally illegal, but uphold the results of that illegal process anyway, hasn't the law just been reduced to a transaction fee?
That's the scary part.
Right. Like, you can break the Constitution, you just have to budget for the 50 million shilling penalty afterward.
And that is the exact fear highlighted by analysts in the dossier. If constitutional violations are treated as mere civil wrongs that can be remedied with a financial payout, then the Constitution is no longer a protective shield for the citizen.
It's just a price list.
Exactly. It transforms into a menu of prices for the ruling elite. If you control the state resources, you can afford to violate any right you want, knowing the courts will simply hand you a bill at the end of the day.
So if the highest court in the land effectively tells you that the Constitution won't protect your job, I mean, you don't just go back to the office and pack your things. You have to change the battlefield entirely.
You have to pivot.
Is that why Gachagua immediately canceled all his public appearances and just vanished?
Yes. It dictated his entire shift in strategy. Because leading up to this, Gachagua had been touring the country, drawing massive crowds.
People were turning up.
Oh, huge numbers.
Citizens are deeply frustrated right now with rising taxes, a depreciating shilling, and just general economic pain. He had real momentum as this new voice of dissent.
But instead of riding that wave of public anger, he announces a 45-day retreat. He goes back to his home in Wamanyoro village to, quote, consult, pray, and plan.
Right.
And look, 45 days in modern politics is an absolute eternity.
A lifetime.
You might as well fall off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
So what does going to the village actually accomplish structurally?
Well, in the context of Kenyan political theater, going to the village is highly symbolic, but it's also deeply strategic. How so?
It signifies a withdrawal from the daily noise of, constant press conferences. He's stepping back to engage in serious, high-stakes backroom maneuvering. It's a tactical pause. He's letting the economic realities on the ground simmer while he holds court away from the capital.
Like plotting his next move.
Exactly. The sources in the dossier indicate that fierce coalition negotiations are happening completely out of sight during this retreat.
He's running the math for the next general election in 2027.
He has to be. Gachagua knows his 7 million Mount Kenya voters make him a kingmaker. But, and this is crucial, they aren't enough to win the presidency outright on their own.
You need a national coalition.
Precisely. So he is exploring alignments with the very opposition figures he spent the 2022 election campaigning aggressively against.
Okay, so who is he talking to in the village?
He's looking toward veterans of the opposition, people like Raila Odinga.
Right, Odinga is huge. It's massive. Odinga represents the historical center of gravity for the opposition and controls a vast, highly mobilized voting base. Gachagua is also engaging with Kalonzo Musyoka, who is this diplomatic heavyweight with a rock-solid regional bloc.
Okay.
And he's even reaching out to younger, fiery urban leaders like Edwin Sifuna. Gachagua is basically trying to fuse his rural agrarian base with these traditional opposition strongholds.
I see the math. The electoral math makes sense. But I am struggling with the logic of this rebrand.
It's definitely a hard sell.
Right. Gachagua wants to position himself as the anti-Ruto champion for the 2027 election, rallying all these voters against all these broken economic promises. But wait, he was the co-architect of that very administration.
Yes, he was.
He helped build the Hustler platform. He was the deputy president when all these unpopular tax policies were being drafted and passed. Can he really just wash his hands of the inflation and the economic pain just because they fired him? It is an incredible political contradiction. And undeniably, it's his greatest vulnerability going into 2027. Gachagua is essentially attempting to amputate his own recent history.
Just pretend it didn't happen.
Exactly. He is banking on a very specific psychological phenomenon in voters. He's hoping that their immediate anger at his unfair impeachment, combined with their daily economic struggles, will somehow override their memory of his role in creating that very system.
That is a massive gamble.
It is. He's gambling on the old adage that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, even if, my new friend was my fiercest opponent just yesterday.
It's wild. But reading through the dossier, it seems like whether Gachagua succeeds in this 2027 rebrand or fails completely, the mechanics of how he was removed is the real story here.
I agree completely.
This is where the deep dive really zooms out from a hyper-specific Kenyan drama to the broader Pan-African implications.
Yes. The dossier explicitly notes that this entire saga, and specifically that High Court's ruling, creates a deeply concerning template for other nations.
Which ones are they looking at?
We're looking at countries like Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Places where the balance between executive power and democratic institutions is, frankly, already historically fragile.
Because it redefines the blueprint for getting rid of political enemies.
Exactly.
Because the historical narrative of a power grab usually involves, military tanks rolling into the capital and seizing the state broadcast station.
So classic coup.
Right. But this situation demonstrates you don't need a military coup to remove an inconvenient rival anymore.
You really don't. You don't need soldiers if you have a compliant legislature and a judiciary terrified of chaos.
Right.
The dossier uses a very specific, chilling term for this. They call it Judicial capture by procedural fiction.
Judicial capture by procedural fiction. Let's break down how that actually works in practice.
Okay, so structurally it operates like this. An executive branch wants to remove a rival. They rush an impeachment process through the parliament.
Moving super fast.
Yeah, right. They're deliberately cutting corners, withholding witnesses, violating constitutional due process just to get it done quickly. They know the process is illegal.
But they don't care.
They don't care. Because they also know that by the time the rival gets the case in front of a judge, the removal is already a fait accompli. It's an accomplished fact.
The new guy is already sworn in and sitting in the office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The transition has happened. So when the court finally reviews the case, the judges look at the situation and realize that reversing the illegal impeachment means unseating the new leader.
Which is messy.
Extremely messy. It means clashing directly with the executive branch and potentially triggering mass protests. So the court uses national stability as an excuse to just uphold the illegal removal.
So the fiction is that the procedure was legitimate.
Right. The fiction is that the procedure was legitimate enough to stand. And the capture is that the courts willingly play along for the sake of institutional peace.
It sends a painfully clear message to any leader looking to consolidate power. Act fast, break the law, get your person into the seat, and the courts will just cover for you later in the name of keeping the peace.
And that really brings us full circle back to the $15 million bribe, the 2 billion shillings.
Oh, right, because that's the alternative to the messy court case.
Exactly, because even if Gachagua never proves that offer in a court of law, the mere act of making that allegation public disrupts the entire ecosystem. It exposes the actual mechanics of what political scientists call elite bargaining.
How does elite bargaining function behind closed doors?
Well, it is a system where ideological differences are totally secondary. What truly matters is that loyalty, silence, and smooth transitions of power all have a literal numerical price tag.
So it's literally just buying people off.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Elite bargaining is how you prevent the tanks from rolling into the streets. You just buy out your rivals. It relies entirely on discretion, mutual benefit, and keeping the public utterly in the dark about the transactional nature of their government.
But by going public with that massive number, $15 million, Gachagua has effectively normalized whistleblowing at the highest possible level of government.
He really has.
I mean, he might be doing it purely out of self-preservation because his political survival is on the line. But regardless of his motives, he is changing the trust dynamics of these backroom deals forever.
He has shined a floodlight on the black market of political power.
Yeah.
Because if a deputy president can step in front of the cameras and say, the president offered me $15 million to disappear quietly, it fundamentally alters the calculus within that elite circle.
Nobody trusts anybody anymore.
Right. The next time a corrupt politician tries to buy off a rival, they have to wonder, is this conversation being recorded? Is my opponent just going to hold a press conference tomorrow and leak the exact dollar amount to the public?
He accidentally introduced radical transparency into a system that absolutely required shadows to function.
Which is the ultimate paradox of Rigathi Gachagua. He is a product of the very system of elite bargaining he is now threatening to dismantle.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and look at the massive amount of ground we've covered today.
It's a lot.
We started with an alleged $15 million bribe designed to make a messy political problem just vanish.
Right.
We explored a court ruling that tied itself in logical knots, basically admitting a process was fundamentally unconstitutional, but upholding it anyway for the sake of stability, effectively reducing constitutional law to a financial penalty.
The 50 million shilling fine.
Exactly. And we looked at a 45-day tactical retreat that could completely rewire opposition alliances for the 2027 Kenyan elections.
And through all of these events, we see the raw mechanics of power laid bare. It's the constant friction between the democratic ideals written in a constitution and the stark transactional reality of elite bargaining.
Based on everything in the dossier, we've talked extensively about how the power brokers, the judges, and the presidents navigate this system. But looking forward to 2027 and beyond, there is a lingering thought here about the broader cost of this kind of politics.
Yeah, the macro view.
Because if a sitting deputy president's silence is currently valued at $15 million, what does political inflation look like down the road?
It is a really sobering trajectory. Because if the baseline cost to remove a single rival or even secure a single alliance is $15 million, the barrier to entry for participating in democracy becomes astronomical.
It makes you wonder what happens to organic, grassroots political movements.
They get priced out.
Right. If the real decisions are being dictated by who can afford a $15 million buyout in a back room, does democracy eventually just become an exclusive auction?
A system where only billionaires and massive syndicates can even afford to sit at the table.
Completely pricing out the everyday voter the system was actually built to serve?
That is the structural danger of elite bargaining. It monetizes the democratic process until the citizen's voice is just drowned out by the sheer volume of the capital changing hands.
It's a heavy concept to sit with, honestly. But understanding how the mechanics of power operate behind the curtain is exactly why we do these deep dives. Thank you so much for joining us on this one. We hope it gave you some tools to look past the headlines and understand the forces shaping the decisions you see unfolding in the news. Until next time, keep digging.